difference is like you can use this variables only in a single workflow. Okay. So when I say single workflow, which means a single XAML file. Suppose if you create one particular variable, right? Let's say like you are creating a variable called something like variable one. Okay, so you use this particular variable only in this particular main.xaml. Suppose if you create, see, I'm creating one more XAML. Okay, so how I am going to create? If we do control n, right, which means a new sequence will be getting created. So if I press Control N, I will be able to create a new sequence. That is new workflow. Okay, so this particular variable, right? Whatever variable that you have created in main.xaml, that you cannot use it in sequence.xaml. Okay, so this is the another XAML that we have just created. So whatever that you have created over here, right? The variable that you cannot use it in sequence. So that is the limitation of the variable. So to overcome the limitation of this variable concept, right, that's when we come for arguments concept. Okay. So the arguments, right, if you create an argument, you can pass that argument to another sequence also. You can use that argument in another sequence also. Okay. So that is the main difference between variable and argument. So now we'll see a demonstration on this. Okay. So what we will do is we'll try to create like we'll try to get two numbers from the user. Okay, and then here I'll give you the requirement first. Like we are going to get input from the user. Okay, basically two numbers, and then the addition operation should happen in the sequence.xaml. We will be going to get input from the user in the main.xaml, and only the addition operation should happen in the sequence.xaml. Again, the result we will be going to get right after adding two numbers. So that result has to be again displayed to the end user in the main.xaml, not in the sequence.xaml. Okay, so this is our requirement. So to get the input from the user, which activity we have to use? Yesterday we have, right? Do you remember the activity name? Okay, something it starts with input, right? So we have these many things, which is the correct one? No, input dialog, right? So get the input from the user. So what input dialog does? Like it shows a prompt, and then like there, it shows the label also, and the corresponding label we will be going to enter, right, the value. So input dialog is the appropriate activity. So I'm placing that Yeah, yeah. So I have placed that activity in the sequence container. So now what I'm going to do, just will give some window title. Okay, add numbers, and then we'll give it as enter number one. And then again it is going to be a text box only, because it is not going to be a multiple choice, right? So it is a text box. So what we will do is we'll create a variable to store that number whatever the user has entered. Okay, so here we'll create as first number. Okay, so now we have created the variable. If I go to variable section, what it is showing, it is showing us string data type. But we want to do addition operation, right? Then is the corresponding data type should be string or integer? Correct. So we'll change the data type from string to integer. Okay, so now we have changed that data type. So now we are getting only number one, right? Similarly, like we'll try to get the number two also. What I did, just I did control copy paste. Okay, so control C, control V, like similar to other in Word or in Notepad we used to use this shortcut, right? So it's the same thing. Okay, so here we'll try to get number two. Okay, and then We'll remove this and then we'll create one more variable called second number. So now we have created two variables. So we'll again change the data type to integer similarly. Okay. So now we have changed. Now we know like we will be going to get two inputs from the user, right? So I have mentioned like only the input getting part should be there in the main.xaml, and the addition operations part and all should happen in the sequence.xaml. That's what our requirement, right? So here if I go, and if you want to do any operation, right, like in other programming languages, how you will be doing, like first of all you will be getting something like this: int a equal to 5, int b equal to 10, something like this. Basically what this means, for this particular variable we are assigning some value, right? So a equals to 5, basically here assigning thing is happening, right? Similarly here also what we are going to do, and finally like where you will be storing, like you will be storing some result like this, right? C equal to a plus b. If you do like this, here you will get number 5 and here you will get number 10. So addition operation will happen, and then that particular value will be getting assigned to this particular variable called c, right? Similarly here also we are going to do the same thing, but which activity we have to use to assign this particular numbers and all, right? Which activity we have to use, like the activity name is assign. Okay, so here also we are doing assigning things only, right? A equals to 5, basically we are assigning 5 to the variable a, right? So same thing. So just use assign activity, and then here you will be getting to know basically what this save to means, like in which variable you want to save. Choose where to save the value. Okay, you are going to save some value, but in which variable you want to save, it is asking. Okay, and here value to save, what value you want to save. Okay, so here what we will do is, so if I try to access that first number, whatever we have created in this particular XAML, right? So here we have created two variables, first number and then second number. Only that number we are going to do addition, right? So if I try to add those two things, I have copied first number and then again I'm copying second number to the sequence.xaml. Okay, we have copied, but still why are we getting error? Any idea? Yeah. So we know the limitation of the variable, right? Like it can be used only within a single workflow. It cannot be passed to the another workflow, right? So for that case only, we will be going for arguments concept, right? So here, if you I open arguments similar to variable C, in variables you will be able to see name, and then like data type you will be able to see, and then you will be seeing scope and then default value, right? So that's what the things which will be available, right? Name, variable type, scope is available, correct? But in arguments, instead of scope we have something called as direction. Then why not scope? If it has some scope, right, then we are limiting those variable things, right? So because of that limitation only we introduced the concept called argument. So that's the reason we will be not able to see something called a scope. Okay, instead of that we will be seeing something called as direction. Okay, so here if I expand this, right, you will be seeing four types of direction. Okay, but you can ignore the last one. You can focus on the first three, top three: in, out, in or out. Okay, so before jumping, like we should know what this means: in or out, and then out. So basically, these are all the three types of arguments which we have. Okay, so first we'll go one by one. The first argument is indirection. Okay, so here we have two XAML files. Consider this main as the parent XAML and then the sequence as the child XAML. Okay, so whenever you are trying to get input, right? So here we are trying to get two numbers, correct? For sequel in sequence, if we need to add two numbers, whatever we got over here. So here we got first number and then second number. So this number has to be passed to this sequence, right? So basically sequence is expecting some input from another XAML, right? That is main XAML. So sequence is expecting some input from main XAML. So that's the reason. So whenever it is expecting some input from another XAML, right? So in that case, you have to use in direction. Okay. So in simply what we can say is when child is expecting some input from parent, some input from parent, then in that case, you have to create in argument, how to create in argument in the child workflow. How to create in argument in the child XAML. Okay. So this is how you will be going to get input. Okay. So in the child XAML only you have to create the argument. So what we will do is we'll create two arguments. Why we need to create two arguments? Because here user is giving two numbers, right? First number and then second number. So to hold these two values, we have to create two arguments, right? So again, to for the argument naming it, argument also has some naming convention. The naming convention is always you have to use the direction first. Okay, in underscore, and then you can give your argument name whatever that you want. Okay, so here what I will do is number one, I'll give something like this, and then again argument type should be of type integer, right? It should not be string, because if it is a string then it will just concatenate. Suppose if the user is entering 10 and then 20, what it will do, it will just, instead of adding, it will just join those two things, like 1020, right? Instead of 30 it will give us 1020. So that thing we don't want, right? So that's the reason we are changing the data type to integer. So similarly, we'll create one more argument called number 2, and again here also we'll change it to integer 32, job done. Okay, so here consider that number 1 and number 2 is going to get stored in this in number 1 in number 2. So now what we want to do, we want to add these two things, right? In number 1 and then in number 2. So we have added these two things, and we are going to store that result in a particular place. Okay, either it can be a variable or it can be an argument. Okay, so first what we will do is we'll try to create a variable. Okay, and then we'll display the result in this particular XAML itself, post which like will come to our original requirement. So what I will do is I'll have created the variable control using control K, and if I go here, like we have to change this data type to integer. Now it is done. Okay, so now again to display the result, right? Which activity we have to use? Do you remember the activity name? Okay, it is message box. Yeah, and here we are going to call this particular variable because this is the variable which is going to hold our result, right? So we have called this, but okay, so now that is also done. Now if we run this particular project, right, will it display the result or no? Just do some guesses. It will. Okay, so let's try. Okay, I'll show it in you in stepwise manner so that you will be able to understand. So I'm doing step into. See, it is coming to the first input dialog activity. So it will ask me the number. So I'll be giving us 10, and then second activity, I'll be giving us 20, and the flow has been again moved to the main container. Now, if I do step into, what happened? Execution got completed.